Now TV. Today I have the pleasure of talking with Barbara Alexander, and she is a practitioner, has been in her career for over 35 years. She is a psychotherapist, she is a spiritual director, and she's also an integral practitioner, an integral coach. So welcome, Barbara. I'm so glad that you're here with us today. I know a lot of your work has been around humanity's ability to change, and I just love that, because that belief that we don't have to stay where we are, that we can have an awakening, we can wake up even in terms of our own behavior and going forward in our world, in terms of how we deal in our relationships, how we deal with relationships at work, at home, and how we deal with ourselves, even having more love and caring and compassion for ourselves. So I'm so excited really to talk to you about all of this, and being a coach myself and a psychotherapist, it's really interesting to talk to someone who speaks kind of the same language.
Exactly.
And wanting to introduce you as one of our Raising Consciousness Now team members, wanting to introduce you to the world as well, with the people that we work with. So welcome, and anything you want to say before I start with some questions, Barbara?
I was just thinking about what you said about humanity's capacity to change, and thinking that that really has been my driving force since I was 19 or 20 years old. It was at university that I got the information that we had way more potential, or way more capacity than we thought we did. Of course, that was a long time ago. That was at the time of the human potential movement. And that has been my driving force all these years.
Wow. Yeah. Jean Houston was one of my earlier people that I really looked to through the human potential movement. And I even got to study with her a few years back for a year. And that was just amazing, because she has been so much a part of that human potential movement.
Has she ever? Yeah. I would actually reward myself every time I finished a paper or did an exam by going to the bookstore and buying one of the books by Jean or Michael Murphy or George Leonard. So, yeah.
Great. Yeah, I know. That was my big reward, too. I get to buy a book that I really want. Yeah. Now you can download them instantly on Amazon, right?
Isn't it great?
On the Kindle. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Barbara, what does consciousness mean to you? And that's really kind of the heart of how all of us on Raising Consciousness Now and Consciousness Now TV, how we all came together, is around this belief that we can change as humanity and we can become more conscious in the way that we live. So what does that actually mean to you? Everybody has a little bit different definition, and it is kind of a loaded word, and it's a long word. So some people said, can't we change Raising Consciousness Now? But it's, it really says it all to me, and wanted to stay with that, even though it's a long, website link. So what does that mean to you, Barbara?
Yeah. Well, to me, it's two things. One is the consciousness as such, the unmanifest, the formless, the Godhead, the whatever words we use to describe that which, or that out of which everything arises. So there's the consciousness in the absolute realm, and then there's consciousness in the relative realm. And the relative realm is obviously that which we are aware of. And raising that awareness broadens and deepens our awareness, not just internally, but also in terms of the collective beliefs and assumptions that we have, and the structures in which we live. So I see that as developmental, really. And that the dropping into the consciousness as absolute is what gives us the juice, gives us the energy, if you will, to continue to grow and change. So my work is really about both.
Okay, that's beautiful. Yeah, so tell us, you're an integral practitioner, and you do the integral life coaching, and I'm really curious about that. I looked into the program. Is it Integral Canada?
Integral Coaching Canada,
Integral Coaching Canada. It looks like a really great program. Can you tell us more about what that means?
Sure. Yeah. So let me do both. So the integral practitioner is is something that a lot of people actually are using, and for me, it was a choice of how do I describe myself. So as you said in my introduction, I spent many years as a psychotherapist. I went back to school. I did training in theology and spiritual direction, and then did the Integral Coaching Canada. I'm a voracious learner, um, and so I didn't know how to describe all that, because when you work with me, that you get all that. Um, so I just finally decided on practitioner, and integral, because it is my framework. It is a meta theory that, as I got deeply immersed in what it means, I was able to sort of hang everything that I know and have learned into that meta theory. So that's been really helpful for me. Integral coaching, at least as taught by Integral Coaching Canada, uses the integral theory in a very practical way. So one of the things that's said in the integral world is that Ken's theory is the hard drive, and then everyone else, the people who are using integral framework in business or in psychotherapy or in medicine or in sustainability, that's the software.
Oh, and nice. I like that. So you're talking about Ken Wilber, who's the creator and author and philosopher of integral theory.
Exactly. And Ken has some amazing original work, and much of his gift is the capacity to synthesize. So that's why it's called a meta theory, because it's synthesizing what we know about spirituality and psychology and what we know from the ancient times as well as now. So that's that. And Integral Coaching Canada's coaching program is a really nice example of the software, of how does the integral principles work in a coaching program. So basically it is designed to assess someone using a variety of developmental lines, also looking at typologies. So this is what underlies integral theory, is lines, levels of development, typologies. So by the time that the assessment is finished, you've actually looked at 12 different lenses and where someone is with regard to whatever it is that they're bringing to work on, or whatever their topic is.
Wow, so that really takes the subjectivity out of it in a lot of ways.
In some ways, yes. I mean, of course, there's a way in which you can't ever take yourself out of it.
Right.
But there is a way in which looking at someone from all of those different lenses helps you to do what they call looking as. And so it's a way of actually stepping into somebody's experience and looking out through their eyes and saying, so this is how the world looks to this person that I'm about to start coaching with. And so it's a wonderful way to connect. Wonderful way, yeah.
When you say typologies, you're talking about like the Myers-Briggs and things like that, right?
They use gender and Enneagram, but in the training. But of course, once you're finished with the training, you can use whatever other typologies there are. So Myers-Briggs, astrology. Some people have really gotten into human design, which is a typology that is so complicated, I haven't started into it yet.
I have not heard of that one. That's interesting. Can you define that for us, or is it not definable right now?
Yeah, it's too much. Well, it's too much to talk about, and I know too little. But it is. But of course, what we know is that typologies are just a wonderful way, but not the only way, to look at how do I go into the world. And I guess that's probably the key with integral, is that everything is looked at as true but partial. So there are people who work with people and only use the frame of Enneagram or only use a frame of development. And what Integral says is the whole is all of those things.
Right, which I love that about Integral. And, I've studied some Integral, and as we talked earlier, and it's a great framework to come from. And it is a theory, like you were talking about. So I like the idea that the software is actually how you utilize that framework.
Right, right. Because the criticism very often of Integral is that it's theoretical only. And it's not. It starts with theory, but in order to ground it in any discipline that you're in, you absolutely have to find practical application. Yeah, and people have done brilliantly with that.
Now, with that, there's something that comes up that I'm really curious about, and that's something that they call the spiritual bypass. Mm-hmm. And I've heard it in relationship in different spiritual communities, in relationship to maybe something like Integral, where you can be maybe at a different developmental stage, maybe in your 20s or 30s, and learn all about the Integral theory and have an affinity maybe for going vertical, which means, developing faster along our growth path. And with that, a spiritual bypass. Can you talk to that and what that means and how you see that?
Yeah. I think spiritual bypassing, just generally speaking, is anything that you're doing in order to move beyond where you really are, perhaps not do the work that needs to be done, which may be psychological work, it may be actually spiritual development work. But in the Integral community, and you're right, that's really part and parcel of what I was saying about Integral gets criticized for its theory, is that it is very easy to get steeped in the theory and be able to talk it, right? But the embodiedness isn't there.
Kind of like the structure underneath, right?
Yes, exactly. So you can speak in sort of Integral terms. You can use developmental terms and you can talk about states of consciousness and all of that. But that doesn't mean that you yourself are at a particular higher stage of development because of that. It's interesting. I think it's Jane Lovinger that says we're usually 2 levels below where we think we are. And to me, that's a really humbling and good reminder that it's one thing to read about things, and it's quite another to embody it and operate in the world fully from wherever it is that you think you are.
Right, right. And so it's more than just about where you think you are, too. It's even using the language of that developmental stage or phase. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, if you learn things, you absolutely can speak the language and not necessarily be there in the whole of you.
Okay. Well, yeah. I've been on a growth path since probably I was 15 or so. And yeah, it kind of I really became conscious. It was a time in my life where I was using drugs and alcohol and was in a painful situation in my home life. And then one day I woke up and I said, oh my gosh, if I keep on this path, I'm going to look just like, some people in my life. And I don't want to grow up being an alcoholic and an addict. Right. And it was just like that. Boom. One day I woke up, it was 10 days before my 16th birthday. I started meditating, praying, learning about stuff, playing my guitar, singing spiritual songs that just came from my heart, and I wanted to grow from that point on. And so that's been my history. So now, one thing that you said is like you want to be at a different developmental stage. I have an affinity for wanting to be as conscious and aware and to work with my shadow side, or the part of me that where my blind spots are, maybe things that come out. Maybe I could say something that, wow, I wish I wouldn't have said it that way. It's not very skillful the way I said that. So if I want to grow more and I'm always seeking growth, how is that different than doing a spiritual bypass in terms of that? Can you like eke that out for me a little bit?
Well, yeah, and probably we can eke it out together, because it it seems to me as though what you're describing is a real on the ground, looking at yourself, learning to meditate, for example, which was, is a practice. So as I listen to you, I'm thinking, so what she was doing was not just here. And I think the bypassing comes when we're stuck in ideas only. And because we have ideas, we feel like we've done the shadow work or we've learned to do deep practices like meditation. But there's a long way from understanding theory and being able to use those words and having actually done the shadow work, looked at our psychological stuff, done the kind of practices that you're talking about. So that to me is the distinction.
Okay. And for me, the shadow work always goes on. I don't feel like I'm ever done. And I love that saying, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow can be.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I'm always wanting to be mindful of that. So I never, from a therapist standpoint, I never feel done. I know that, and I've been teaching this since I was teaching at Cal State Fullerton and with clients early in my 20s, and I don't know where I learned it, but I'm sure I learned it from one of my mentors there at Cal State Fullerton, is that we go through developmental stages and our stuff, our core issues come back up and come back around as we, every time we kind of go to that state of disequilibrium where we're going from one stage to the next and it doesn't feel comfortable and we're moving in that direction, then boom, all the stuff comes up. And I know that's happened for me, and there's been many a time when I said, oh my gosh, why do I have to deal with this again? What's wrong with me? Why haven't I finished this stuff? Certain times of the year, I was talking with another friend the other day, and we're going into the holiday season, or we're right in the holiday season, and there's both joy and really a lot of pain around the holidays for a lot of people, including for myself. It brings up a lot of old memories, and so knowing that as that comes around, I'm grieving that again, but I release it faster, I guess.
Right. Exactly. You and I'm sure our training in many ways was the same, and you were doing exactly what I do, which is to say it comes around on a higher rung of the spiral, but it's the same thing. And so rather than say, oh, this again, which I, like you, have said for many years, you say, oh, so it's a deeper level or it's a higher place. And what I say to the people that I work with is what you're looking at is not that it's up again for you, but how quickly are you aware of it and how well can you move yourself through it? Because it really is a gift of more and more spaciousness, the more we can work it out.
Right. Oh, I like that. It's a gift of the spaciousness. Yeah, I always think it, as my heart breaks, it breaks open for more space inside. But I like that vision of the spaciousness too. Yeah. Outside of that part, that's beautiful.
Right. My biggest wound came around my father dying, and so the holidays aren't hard for me. It's when he died, and I can, even if I don't remember, I can start to feel not okay in October as the anniversary comes up, and it's abandonment. It's a sense of closing my heart down and not trusting anyone. I mean, all of that stuff that comes from the loss of a beloved parent. And for years I said, oh God, are I done with this? But I really am convinced that I'll never be done with it.
I guess that's one of the most important messages I think we could even get out there today is to say, to notice that your critic is there on your shoulder giving you a hard time about the fact that you're grieving and that your heart is aching and hurting, and that it doesn't mean that you haven't done any work on it before. It just means that you're doing it at another level, or even for myself, I feel like it's a different perspective.
Yes.
And I bring all of me to, all of the growth that I've done to that moment of that grief.
Yes.
And I like to think about going back to that small child that I was when I was abandoned and abused, really, and to be there, like kind of like an angel holding that space, and saying that it's going to be okay, you will get through this, kind of thing. That's kind of just one of my own practices that I started doing a while ago.
Yeah, it's a great one. It's fascinating to me, and this is what the people that are around me a lot say. This is you sort of press a button, and Barbara will tell you this, but it's really true, and that is that it seems as if our way of operating, sort of defaultish, is to be critical of what we're experiencing, and as soon as you do that, you set up a dynamic between the part of you that's criticizing yourself and the part of you that's having whatever the experience is. And so even though it seems to us as if it's a way to get ourselves out of it, it's really a recipe for staying stuck, because the more that you shake your finger at yourself, which of course you know, then the other part inside at some point is going to say, you know what, I'm done with you. And so you've got this happening, because even you, this other part of me, doesn't understand me. And so you have a war of the world internally. So it seems like it's counterintuitive for us to do what you're talking about here. One of my spiritual mentors said you have to start every sentence that you say to yourself with sweetheart.
Oh, nice.
Right? That if you do this, that will unblock the energy and help you move forward, instead of this. But, we're bad at it.
Right. I know Daniel Siegel, he has a way of calming and nurturing the self, and that is putting one hand on your heart and the other on like your solar plexus. So if I can stand up here, as a way of self-soothing. And you might be the other hand over the heart. So just kind of find what works for you.
Right.
But it really is about that self-soothing, that nurturing, that caring for self. And we can't really do it for other people unless we do it for ourselves, and a lot of people don't really believe that. It's like, I'm really compassionate for other people, and then what other judgments go on behind that sometimes too, and just noticing that. So really that self-love, self-compassion, I love that, starting out with sweetheart.
Isn't that lovely? Yeah, that's Sylvia Boorstein. Yeah. Yeah.
So I just want to ask you one last question, and it seems pretty obvious, so maybe it's a silly question at this point, but how specifically do you bring raising consciousness into your work?
Yeah. Well, so for me, as I said in the beginning, there's the consciousness as such in the absolute realm, and the consciousness in the relative realm, which is a deeper and broader awareness. And so in my work, I actually do both. I actually spent the 3 years that I was doing a Master of Divinity looking at the intersection between psychology and spirituality. And so I teach meditation and other practices that help people to ground themselves in that place of no separation, of that recognition that we are more than we think we are. And I think that helps fuel. In fact, we've got some data that says that meditation is one of the best practices for moving people developmentally, because it helps us to have more spaciousness. And that use of that word spaciousness is not from me. I actually have learned that. So my work is both helping people in terms of spiritual practices, and then also helping people to move along developmentally, if you will. One of the keys in the coaching process, and actually in all the work that I do, is what are the specific practices that help people move along. I don't think simply talking about things does it, right? So, for example, And there are 3 of these on my website, just sample practices. So a hallmark is the uniqueness of the practices that are designed for someone based on whatever it is that they're wanting to change. But of course, there are themes. And we just talked about a big theme, which is criticism. So on my website are 3 sample practices, so you get a sense of what I mean by specific practices. And while most of them are unique to the individual, because there are some that are such themes for us, I just put 3 up on the website. And one of them is what I call the language of love. And it's the practice of asking yourself, when you notice the critic, what would you say to someone else? Because most of the time, we're good at it.
Like, what would you say to your best friend? That's kind of what
yes, exactly. So it's not a matter of learning a foreign language. We know the language. We just don't use the language on us.
Right.
So that's the kind of specific practice work that I use to help people to move into a deeper and wider space.
Yeah, and that way people really embody it. I love that, because we have gone beyond talking about it all. It's really, what do you do? What's your behavior? And I think Cindy Wigglesworth has done such a beautiful job in terms of looking at the behavioral aspects of spiritual intelligence and bringing that in, which I know we're both trained in her model and her assessment. So, wow, beautiful.
I agree, and I'm absolutely loving all of the good work that Rick Hansen has done. Rick's written The Buddha's Brain is the first one, and his new one has just come out, and I can't remember the name of it. But different people are looking at different aspects of that. So he's looking at the brain research and the neuroplasticity of the brain, which really tells us that practice helps, because practice changes us.
Right. Daniel Amen doing the same thing with SPECT scans and looking at meditators. Yeah.
I mean, one of the beauties of the world right now is that there are so many modalities. There are so many ways that help us. And in my coaching practice, I'm often referring people to do specific things. So while I bring a lot myself, energy work and spiritual direction, it's not nearly all that's available out there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we can't possibly hold it all. And that's what's so wonderful, is that for all the typologies, there's so much that we can bring to each person that feeds the way that they see the world and can meet them where they are. Yeah. That's great.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Wow. So I will have a link to your website and a link also to the Raising Consciousness Now page where all your information is. So people can go to find those 3 practices and be introduced to you even further.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much for doing this interview. I'm so happy that you are part of Raising Consciousness Now. You're a real gift. I enjoyed this interview so much, and just love the conversation and look forward to more. And we're going to do some teleseminars and some webinars with everybody on the Raising Consciousness Now team, and give you a chance to even teach a bit more about what you do, which will be wonderful. Yeah.
Well, I would love that, and thank you very much. Your work is amazing.
Thank you, Barbara. You take care, and we'll end this. So find us on raisingconsciousnessnow.com and consciousnessnow.tv. Have a wonderful day, and keep doing your own growth work so you can help raise the consciousness on this planet in your own corner of the world. Thank you.